start here on weddings. We're going to talk about weddings, and then we'll talk about funerals, okay? Now, look, I want you to do this. Have you done any weddings? Okay, if you were going to do a wedding, what Bible verses would you use? So I'm going to give you a minute or so. Think about that. What Bible verses would you use? And I don't, there's not a correct list, but do you remember the ones you used? Well, just generally, where would you go? There's one in Genesis, chapter 2. And then did you use any others? A lot of people use 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. Hey, Wanda, good morning. Are you coming? Oh, Wanda's coming too. Okay, come on, Wanda. Do you know Tony? Tony's at the Hot Springs campus.
I'm good. How are you?
Okay, listen, Wanda, what Bible verses would you use if you were doing a wedding?
If I was doing a wedding?
Yeah, if you were officiating a wedding.
Well, sadly, I'm not good at what my references are.
Well, just generally, you don't have to give me the exact. Yeah.
I would probably find the ones that talk about I know that they typically do the love one.
Yeah. And your loved one, there's one in 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient, love is kind, love is, that kind of thing.
Which is a good one. Anything that talks about submitting to each other.
Yeah, and that's in Ephesians.
And any that talk about putting others before yourself.
Okay, got it.
That's what makes it.
All right, watch. I'm going to show y'all some verses here, okay? The first one is, y'all turn to Genesis. Can y'all turn to Genesis 2:19? Yeah, and look, do y'all remember in that story of creation, God creates this and says it's good. God creates this and it's good. God creates this and it's good. And then he creates man, and man is by himself, and he says what? It is not good for man to be alone. You see that right there? So in Genesis 2:18, he says, it is not good for man to be alone. And then God gives Adam the job of naming the animals. So in naming the animals, he sees what? Male and female, male and female. He didn't have a partner. And so that's when God puts him to sleep and says what? I'll make you a helper, what? Suitable. And then remember, he took the what? He took the rib out and, made the woman. So again, look, in all of creation, God had declared everything good, and then, there's no suitable helper for Adam.
You think he did that on purpose to make?
I think so. So Adam would be aware, I need somebody. I don't have anybody. I'm by myself. Okay? And look, it says right here at the end, the man and the woman were both naked, and they felt no shame. Okay? So they were good. All right? Now, and then look, verse 24 gives us the best definition of marriage. And look, y'all see right here where it says triple: leaving, cleaving, and becoming. So it says what? Leave your family of origin, cleave to your wife, and then you'll become what? You'll become one. So that's the good thing there. All right. Now, you don't have to say all that when you do your, if you were going to use this passage, but I usually use this passage. I'm doing 2 weddings coming up. One's in February, another's in April. So I'm actually meeting with them now, and counseling. All right. And then look, in the New Testament, y'all turn to Matthew 19. Matthew 19. Jesus refers back to Genesis. And the Pharisees ask him, they say, hey, should we allow divorce? And Jesus says, no, God didn't want divorce, but y'all created it. So do y'all see that passage in Matthew 19, 3-9? Go through that. It's kind of long, but you see how he refers back to Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. So this is another verse that I use. So I start in Genesis, then I say Jesus references that, And then look, the last one that I use is Ephesians. Y'all turn to Ephesians chapter 5. In Ephesians chapter 5, Paul talks about the husband-wife relationship. And if you remember, he says the wife needs to submit to the husband. And then he talks 5 times, he says, husband, love your wife. And the word love, and I usually say this, the word love is agape, which is an unconditional love. 5 times he says, husband, love your wife, husband, love your wife, husband, love your wife. Now, at the very end, it says what? Wife, respect your husband. And you know that book, Love and Respect, that's where that comes from. So you never have to tell a wife to love, and you never have to tell a man to respect, okay? They do that automatically. So I usually say that in the message. So anyway, there's a lot in these verses. Now look, these verses are not, there's a lot of them that you can use. But I use these because Paul does what? Paul goes back and references Genesis. So that's why it's kind of a thread that you start in the Old Testament, you go to the New Testament, and then you go to Paul, and it keeps going back. So those are the things that I use when I do this. All right, God's design for marriage is not, it's a heterosexual, not homosexual or not polygamy. In fact, I saw on TV last night, there's a show for a guy married, 5 wives? What's it called? Yeah, sister wives. It's like, what is this? It's
Somewhat happily married now, though.
correct, yeah, they're not, so it's terrible. But anyway, all right, and then look, this relational aspect of God's image in marriage is portrayed with God's relationship with what? Israel. He's a husband to Israel. And then it's also what? Christ and the church. Christ is the bridegroom, the church is the bride. Okay? So there's a lot of imagery that does this. Okay, I think we got another person. Hey, you coming? I'm coming. Come on. No, it's okay. Look, come sit up here on the front row so we can talk. This will be good. Okay. Now, again, you don't have to share this in your message, but I'm just telling you it's a good thing to be prepared for. Listen, we're talking about marriage, and then we're going to talk about funeral. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going through some of the background and some of the passages that I use when I do a wedding. And look. I just said up here, God's design is for heterosexual, not homosexual, and monogamous, not polygamy. Okay, we were talking about sister wives. I saw an advertisement, where there's 4 or 5 sisters married this one guy.
No, they're all just separate women.
It's terrible. It's terrible. All right, and then look, the fall did what? The fall affected marriage, didn't it? It made things go haywire. And y'all remember the curses, right? One of the curses for the woman is childbearing, but it also, she wants to control the husband, right?
It wasn't childbearing, so the curse, the pain of childbearing.
The pain, right, that's what I meant. Yeah, the pain of childbearing, correct. Can you imagine if there was no pain in childbearing?
We're leading a marriage group tomorrow night that's going to be on that topic. So that's
Wow, that's good, yeah. All right, and then look. Bailey, is it still on? What happened? It's okay. Melvin, get out of here. Okay, there was a breakdown of the trust and intimacy between the man and the woman. Remember, the woman blamed the man, the man blamed the woman. All right, and then look, what had once been a natural outflow of special relationship now has to be what? Worked at, okay? And we have to do that daily. You have to do that daily. I sometimes joke with my wife, hey, you just go find another husband. She's like, take too long to break them in. so well, just in joking, so. Okay, it's funny. We have a good relationship. All right, fundamental to the Christian understanding of God's nature is the concept of relationship. You know how you have the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They work together. Husband and wife also have to work together. So that's a good thing. And then look, in the Old Testament, the husband and wife image is used to illustrate God's relationship with Israel. I went over that a few minutes ago. God is a compassionate, patient husband, okay? And look, y'all probably remember in the Old Testament, there are some good verses here that show how God's unconditional love for his people. And y'all remember also, I think, right here, remember Hosea? Who did Hosea marry? Y'all remember? Gomer. And remember, Gomer was an adulterous woman, promiscuous woman, but it was to illustrate God's what? God's love unconditionally for Israel, even though they were adulterous with idols. So anyway, this is it. And then look, in 1 Corinthians 7 and Ephesians 5, there are ground rules. So another good passage would be 1 Corinthians 7, for the husband-wife relationship. In fact, I remember when I was, in college and I would read 1 Corinthians 7, and Paul says it's best, what? Not to be married. I'm thinking, well, shoot, maybe I should be celibate, But he says if the passion and desire is too great, then, you need to get married. So, but listen, I can tell y'all something. I was thinking about becoming a priest. And when I was a freshman in college, I went to a retreat for men who were thinking about becoming priests. And there were, 30, 40 men. And I've never heard an audible voice from God, but I felt God telling me, don't do this. And so I left that retreat. And I was a Christian, but I was still going to the Catholic Church. I left there and said, I will never do that. I'll never become a priest. And I pursued becoming a pastor instead. Yeah. So, all right. Now, in the a second link is covenant. There's the Old Testament. There's a covenant between marriage, and God's relationship with his people is often in covenant terms, okay? Y'all know the Abrahamic covenant, Genesis chapter 12. God says that he will give Israel land, seed, and blessing, okay? And then there's the new covenant in Jeremiah 31 that promises the forgiveness of sin, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, and New Jerusalem. And Jesus, remember when he takes the cup at the Last Supper, he says, this is the covenant the new covenant in my blood. He's referring back to Jeremiah 31. So, all right, God's covenant with Israel is described in marriage terms. Y'all see the different verses, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. Those are all God's relationship with Israel in a marriage term. And then this guy, David Atkinson, points out the correlation between marriage and God's covenant. So again, there's a lot of this that's in the Old Testament. So there's the link between the covenant and marriage. All right, and then look, in establishing his covenant with Israel, God made several promises. Now, do y'all remember, I just told you about the Abrahamic covenant, remember? He said land, seed, and blessing, and that's what they're fighting about right now is the land, the land. And, but that was what we call unilateral covenant. In other words, God alone was the one responsible. Y'all remember the Mosaic covenant where there's the 10 commandments and there's 672 rules that they have to follow. That is a bilateral covenant in that if we do this, then God will bless us. Y'all look at Deuteronomy 28, Deuteronomy chapter 28. In Deuteronomy 28, there are the blessings and curses for the Mosaic covenant. Do y'all see that? Deuteronomy 28. In fact, I had a professor at seminary, and he said, this chapter, Deuteronomy 28, is the most important chapter in the Old Testament because from that point forward, God shows how Israel is not obeying the covenant. And I don't know if y'all remember, but in 722, the northern kingdom was taken away. And then in 586, the southern kingdom of Judah was taken away. And remember, they were in captivity 70 years, and then they come back and they rebuild the temple. Okay, y'all see Deuteronomy 28? There's the curses, the blessings are first. I think it's the first 14 verses, and then 15 through, 60 something is a bunch of curses. Y'all see that? So remember, bilateral is two-way, unilateral is one way. So God's referring here to his unilateral promise with the nation of Israel. And that's what we're talking about now. And Mark Turner's just coming this week. You heard that?
Yes.
And Mark Turner's just going to be here. And listen, I texted him like October 8th or 9th. The thing happened on the 7th because we were trying to get a trip to Israel. And he said, hey, my wife is in southern Israel. We're separated. I can't get to her right now. So he's coming to share with us. He lives in Israel. He got his degree from Israel. He lives there now. So he's coming back. But he's kind of both. He lives there. He lives here. Yeah, and he has kids that are here. And his wife from Israel is a second marriage. Anyway.
So I assume they get back together?
Yeah, I think so. And that's probably why he's coming. But anyway, he's gonna share more about Israel and what's happening and stuff. So I know he's probably going to speak at GLR, West Little Rock, and here. And Tony, they may video it in, to our other campuses. I don't know. You'd have to ask. Okay, now let's talk about this. What I do when I do a marriage, I require that they do 6 weeks of premarital counseling. Okay. These are statistics. Couples who underwent counseling before their wedding have a 30% higher success rate, okay? The median time that couples spend in counseling is about 8 hours, and I do 6 sessions with them, so I do about 6, maybe 7 hours with them.
Isn't it New Life's policy that they go through?
Yeah. But I'm saying sometimes not all churches require that, so... Like, again, I remember I'm doing 2 weddings, one in February, one in April, and I'm doing the counseling. One of them is remote because they live in Austin. I'm doing the wedding in Austin. It's for a friend.
Trying to do it remotely.
No, but I'm doing the counseling remotely. So we get on Google Meet and we do it. And the other one I'm doing face-to-face, here.
You say here, but not here.
Correct, yeah. It's
So make sure I didn't miss
correct, yeah. All right, and then look, 44% of couples who get married today agree to premarital counseling before they take their vows. Okay, I think it's important that we do this. Look, in the 30s and 40s, when divorce rates were lower, premarital counseling only occurred about 7% of the time. Now, that was a long time ago, but it's more now. All right, now, here are the benefits. You discuss areas that are going to be problems in the relationship before they happen: money, sex, parenting, religion. Okay? You better understand their family history and how that can influence the relationship. So I go over that with them, and it strengthens your communication and conflict resolution skills. Okay? And then you openly discuss views on love, infidelity, and divorce. So these are things that I do. And then you define expectations for marriage, finances. And look, 6 hours is not enough. You know what I'm saying? It's a drop in the bucket, but at least it's something. Exactly, yeah. But at least they have a foundation, And I have a book. If y'all want to write this down, I don't know if you're taking notes, but it's called Before You Say I Do. Before You Say I Do by H. Norman Wright. And it has 13 or 14 chapters in that book, and I only cover 6 of them. So, but I get them to buy the book, and then they can go over it. Another thing that Lisette and I did is, y'all know those conferences that Family Life puts on? We went to those. Those are really good. What are they called? Weekend to Remember. Yeah. And listen, my wife and I, we had a friend that was working in Little Rock, Vic Sheldon. I don't know if he was there a long, long time ago. But he'd give us free passes, and then we'd bring a bunch of people from church. And so we went to 6 or 7 of them.
And you get something different every year.
Yeah. So, all right, now look, this is what I cover in my sessions, okay? The first one, I get to know the couple. I have an information sheet that they fill out. And it also says, if you were to die tonight, where would you go? And that lets me know where they are spiritually, okay? And if they're not a Christian, I'll share the gospel. I'll say, hey, have you been baptized? Do you know what that means? Blah, blah, blah. So we usually go over that. And then we do a personality profile. And Tony, I used to buy these. They were like $20 a piece, for the disc profile. And then I started using Gary Small. He has those animals, you know, the lion, the otter, the beaver. They're the same as this DISC, but it's free. And so I give that to the couple. They work on it. Then we talk about, and the Gary Smalley says, if your spouse is a lion and you are an otter, here are some tension points. So it's really good. All right, and then we talk about communication, and I set up a block pattern, and I put something between them, and one has to give directions, and the other, listens and can't talk. And then we talk about some other, areas of communication. And then we talk about finances and budgeting and those kind of things. And then session 5, we talk about in-laws, and I do a genogram, and a genogram is just a fancy name for an org chart. So you start with the man and the woman, and you go back, and then you can see if they've had a lot of divorce. Hey, was your parents divorced? Were your grandparents divorced? And then sometimes it's all convoluted, because there are people that, it's blended families. And then the last one, we talk about roles and sex. So those are the 6 sessions that I go through. And then what I do is at the end of each session, I give them homework. So they got to do homework for the next time. Now, they don't always do it. Sometimes they do it with one sheet, where both of them do it, but at least they're doing something. So they're actually spending a little bit more than 6 hours because they have to work on that homework. It might be close to 12 because the homework takes about an hour for each one. All right, now, here's some symbolism in weddings. Bouquet. Originally, they were made of strong herbs, thyme and garlic, to frighten away evil spirits. You know how a lady walks in with a bouquet, it's different now. What do you have in there? Roses, or, there's other things now. And then look, the bridal veil. This originally came about because they didn't want the groom to look at the wife and go, I don't want her. So they came up to the arranged marriages, and then the veil was undone right when she got there. So, well, y'all remember the story of Jacob? And remember, he got married to Rachel, but it wasn't Rachel, it was what? It was Leah, and it's like, oh my God, it's the wrong one. So anyway, and then look, the ring finger, look, prior to the 5th century, it was actually the index finger. And then later, it was discovered there's a vein here on the, and it goes all the way to the heart. So they did that. So this is just stuff I picked up. And then look, tuxedo, generally the groom wore his Sunday best, but then President Roosevelt popularized the tuxedo. And now most guys probably rent tuxedos. And I'm gonna tell y'all a funny story. When Lisette and I got married, we're in Thibodaux, Louisiana. We got married in June. We got the tuxedos, they were all messed up. And we found out they were Mardi Gras tuxedos, for the Mardi Gras parades, they don't want to get, and man, my dad was just incensed, and it was too late. We went to get them on Friday. We were getting married on, we were incensed. All right, and then look, the wedding ring, look, it dates back to, 3000 BC. The Egyptians had that. And then look, the Romans used iron, but now gold is used because it's pure. And then look, diamonds were used by the Italians. So, I'm just giving you what happens with some of these things. And then look, the white wedding dress was by Queen Victoria. Prior to that, they just simply wore their best dress on their wedding day. Now, how much do you spend on a how much do you spend? How much was the dress? How much was it? 5,000? 10,000? Yeah. I mean, look, I've had 2 daughters get married. It was at least 20,000 when you talk about the wedding dress, the venue, all that kind of stuff. No. But so I'm just saying it. And then they wear it what? They wear it one time. One time. It's crazy. Tony. Praise God. All right, now let's talk about the wedding rehearsal. Usually done the night before the wedding. What I usually do is I walk through the ceremony one time to kind of position everybody, and then we'd walk through a second time just so they remember, okay, here's where I stand, here's what I do. And then usually there's a rehearsal to follow, and then I've done weddings in church, a backyard, a beach, a community center, and a hotel ballroom. And listen, let me tell you something. You know this, Wanda. Very few people get married in church now.
It's not the right.
Now, when I was in Mountain Home, this was back, 25 years ago. Everybody got married in the church. You never went.
Looked a little different then than they do now.
Yeah, but
Now, like, this is a whole different setting than to go in someplace with, like, stained glass windows.
yeah.
Well, a lot of times what we run into now is they won't have
I see, and they can't do it at church.
If you want to have a ceremony here, and then have a reception.
Right, somewhere else. Yeah. So,
It's a hassle to do two places.
yeah, I agree. Okay.
But yeah, people. Like my daughter had an idea of what she wanted the venue to look like. All her life, I mean, as long as we're gonna do live, she's like, my wedding will be free. I'll have it here at the church because I was on staff.
Yeah.
I'll have it at the church, won't cost you anything. And then it comes to time to get married. She's like, I want an all-white venue.
I know. I know.
Free too.
Yeah. It's terrible. Okay, now look, here's kind of a typical wedding. I mean, you can change it up, but this is what I do. Usually you seat the grandmothers, the mother of the groom, mother of the bride are seated. Then you have your groomsmen, you have bridesmaids, flower girl. What's that?
The question I always get is, are they supposed to be on the left or the right?
Typically yeah,
Groom on right.
yeah. All right, and then, the bride enters, everybody stands up, the pastor asks, who gives this woman in marriage, her mother and I, or whatever. And then, you have these songs, scripture. Now, this is where I usually do my scripture, those scriptures. Then you do the vows. And I have the traditional vows, but sometimes people want, more modern vows, or they want to write their own vows. And then we exchange the rings. There's usually prayer. Sometimes there's communion. Or sometimes there's some other, I've had people do a unity candle. I've had people do a cross, where you braid. And then I've had even on the beach, I did a beach wedding and they did something, So, and then look, the groom kisses the bride, procession, and then the people are ordered. It's just, but what I usually do is I go over this with the couple, like on that last session. Okay, y'all tell me what you want, who's singing, that kind of stuff. So that's it. Okay. Now let me move to funerals. Okay, funerals. We're doing pretty good, aren't we? Yeah, we're doing good. And this one's not going to take as long. All right, let's see. Ready? And I hope this is helpful. I teach a class with OBU on ministry. And this is one of the things. And then, what we do? I'd have the students do a wedding. So we'd have a bride and a groom, a pastor, and ring bearer. I mean, so the whole class would be involved in it. So it was funny. Okay, now let's talk about funerals. And listen, I'm going to tell y'all this. I was just talking to Maya. You know Maya Ramos? Tony, do you know Maya? She's, the Hispanic pastor. And do you know Maya?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, from School of Ministry. Well, I was talking about this, and she said, I remember we had just become pastors. Daniel and I were somewhere, and we got a phone call, and somebody, 8 months pregnant, husband got hit and got killed. We had to go to the hospital. We didn't know what to do. She said, I was frozen. We didn't know what to do. So I'm going to talk about that here. Okay, look, grief. The process of reacting to loss. The loss may be physical, social, or occupational, okay? So that's what grief is. And then emotional reactions of grief can include, and look, there's a bunch of them, and different people react different ways. So it's not just one way. Sleeping problems. Listen, I remember I was at another church, and we sent a mission team to Nicaragua. And they were finished with their mission. Everybody came home, and 2 guys stayed to go fishing. And they went fishing, and a storm came upon, and their boat capsized. And they were in the water on an ice chest with 2 Nicaraguans for about 36 hours. And finally, the two men said, "We're going." You know, they went under water, and they let the two Nicaraguan. Well, one of the wives had severe sleeping problems. She couldn't sleep anymore. You know, so I'm just telling you, there's different ways that this happens. All right, so look, these are the 5 stages of grief. Denial is number 1. Number 2, you become angry. You know, you become angry at God. You become angry at people. So it does different things. So denial, anger. And then look, 3 is bargaining. If only we had sought medical attention sooner. If only we had gotten a second opinion. If only we'd maybe been better toward them. You know, so that's bargaining. And then depression. And look, there are 2 types of depression. The first one is a reaction to practical implications, like what do we do with the cost of the burial? You know, how are we going to do this? And then the second is a more subtle and happens more privately. You know, where they miss the person that's gone. So that's depression. And then finally, acceptance. And look, not everybody goes through those 5 stages in a systematic process. You know, sometimes it might take months, might take years, you know, so it's different. All right, and then look, here are different ways that people mourned in the Bible. Jacob mourned for Joseph. Remember when his brothers sold him, but they told his dad, what? Hey, he got killed by a lion, you know, and they showed the coat of many colors and it had blood on it. And then Joseph mourns for Jacob when he died. Remember, he was in Egypt for 70 days. Israel mourned for Aaron for 30 days. So it looks like in the Bible, they mourned a lot longer than we do, right? We get, how many days of grief do we get? Like 2 or 3, right? I'm talking about from the HR policy. Back to work. No, I mean, it's like, okay, you got to get back to work. So it's terrible. We don't do very good with that as Americans. The disciples mourned for Jesus. And then look, there were men who mourned for Stephen. Y'all remember Stephen went before the Sanhedrin in Acts chapter 7, gave this long speech, and then they said, "You're out of here." And then they stoned him. And remember, Paul was holding the coats or cloaks for the men who were throwing the stones. So some men mourned for Stephen. All right, what to do when someone passes away. This is what I was talking to Maya about. Look, the first thing is you may have to visit the family and the deceased person in the hospital or in a home. That's usually where it happens. I mean, the family is frantic. You know, it's like, oh my God, he just died. You know, it's chaotic. And then a second thing you have to do is you got to set up a time to go with the family. And this usually happens a day or 2 after the death. And you have to go to the funeral home typically, and you have to help the family decide what kind of burial. Are they going to do a casket? Are they going to do cremation? And then look, there's a lot of money issues here. You know, oh, I think my dad wanted to be buried like this. No, he wanted to be, you know, so you got to help with that. And then if they do a casket, you got to help them choose a casket. And then the clothes. And then you got to write an obituary. All this happens at the funeral home. And it could take some time. You know, like somebody will say, well, okay, well, I'll start writing on the obituary, and then you got to, you know, pass it around. And then you got to decide on visitation and ceremony. You know, like where are you going to do it, when you're going to do it. So there's a lot of decisions. And then you have to work on the order of service. So all this happens on that second visit. And then what I do is I set up a third time to go visit the family in a more relaxed environment. So we'll go to a home or a place that's more relaxed, and it's only family members. And I just say, hey, let's reminisce about Tony. You know, what do y'all remember about Tony? And sometimes they start telling stories, and they're funny, and that people are laughing, and it's cathartic for them. And then they'll say, and then some people start crying, and they'll go, well, I remember he also did this. And what I'm doing is I got a piece of paper and a tablet, and I'm writing down all these things that they're saying, and I can use it at the funeral for the eulogy. So it's really good to do that. And then, you know, you start spending time on your funeral. And listen, a lot of times, you know, somebody they pass away, you don't have a whole lot of time to work on a message. You know what I'm saying? It's just like you're helping them and doing all this stuff, and it's a big thing. All right, Here's a typical, I mean, again, this is just what I do. Usually there's some songs, you read an obituary, and sometimes you can get a family member to do that, or you can get another pastor to do that. And then maybe you have, some people eulogize, family or friends, and then the pastor shares a message. And what I do is I talk about the deceased person, but I also talk about the shortness of life. You know how we're here for just a breath. And when you compare it to eternity, we're just a dot on that. And then, but I also try to give them hope. I usually go to John 14, John 14, where Jesus says, I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if I'm going, I'm coming back to take you where I am. So he's preparing a place for us. And then I say, look, whoever the deceased person is, if I know they're a believer, I'll say, so-and-so is in heaven, and if you want to join him, then I usually give a real short gospel message. So that's what I do in this. And then, there's usually a song or so after, and then in the South, people will pay their last respects, so they'll come around the casket. Now, if it's a cremation, they won't do that. But if it is a casket, they'll open the casket, and, people come by, and so the pastor usually stands at the head, shakes hands and offers encouragement. And then you may have to go to a graveyard, and do a real short ceremony there. I usually use 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 is the rapture, where it says that the dead in Christ will be raised first, and those of us who are alive. And I say, so-and-so, if they were a believer, yeah, they get to go first. And then I say, and you know what? We can join them by trusting Christ as our Savior. And again, I don't know if y'all heard Josh, but when you're changing a tire, they listen. Well, when you're doing a funeral, they listen because they realize, oh my God, I could be next, or I'm missing my relative or whatever. So
is this all different if you don't know if they're believers?
yeah, what I do if let's say they're not a believer, I would say, listen, we're going to be in the same position that so-and-so is, and if you want to guarantee that you're going to spend eternity in heaven, so I won't say that person is guaranteed, but I'll couch it in a different way. And I've had to do those before where I know they're not a believer, but I'll say, look, we're all going to be in this same spot, and if you want to make sure you're going to be in heaven. In fact, Tony, I remember I went to Hot Springs and did a funeral for somebody I didn't know. They went here, but it was their father or something. And they played, what's that song? It's a secular song, but we played it in the auditorium over there. Aye. What's that? It's, I forgot the name of it, but it's a really long, like 7-minute song. And this guy was a biker. And I don't know if he got killed on a motorcycle or something, but anyway. Yeah. Freebird. That's it. Freebird. You ever heard of Freebird? Freebird. They played Freebird at the thing. It's crazy. It's crazy. Now look, I remember there was a lady down the street from me. And they come to church here. She passed away, Dot Welch. I don't know if you remember Dot. And she had some friends that came from Indiana. I don't know. They came up. And during this eulogy, I got up, read the obituary, and then these ladies got up, and there were 4 of them. And but Wanda, they must have went for like 20 minutes. You know what I'm saying? And then it's like, and then Pastor Darren and Pastor Rick were supposed to get up, and Darren passed. He said, you go ahead, Rick. So, he just got too long.
Wasn't it the one that they talked about?
Probably. Yeah, probably. So anyway, and that was all of a sudden, this lady was probably like late 40s, early 50s, had a son that was in high school. It was tragic. So, yeah. I think they said she maybe hit her head on the bathtub or something. Yeah. So it was tragic. But anyway. Okay, so that's it. Funeral, wedding. Got it? But listen, I should have said this at the very beginning. These are 2 times that you can really minister to families. And a lot of times it'll make or break. Like they may go, boy, I really, that was a good funeral. I think we'll start going to that church. Same thing with the wedding. It's like these are opportunities for us to minister, but also to build into the lives of those people. Okay?